You, my listener, can be the smartest guy in your category of neckwear. Just tune in for a few minutes every day. Just 5 minutes is all I really would covet from you at the David Tulis Show at 92.7 FM and 95.3 FM HD4. That's high definition digital radio, reaching out 65 miles, covering, well, probably 1 million people all told. And we don't care about the million. We don't care about the tens of thousands. We just care about you, my listener, here today on the David Tulis program. It is Cash Friday today. And on Cash Friday, you and I do something courageous. We do something that's really different and that a lot of people just have not thought of doing. It's actually kind of scary for them to do what I do and what I urge you to do on Cash Friday. And that is go to your local Federal Reserve approved bank or credit union and shock the teller. Just shock the teller. She'll look at you and she'll say, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this?" I mean, it's a little dangerous. I mean, you could get knocked off if you do this. Well, ma'am, just give me my $100, please. And because what you've done is you've written a check for $100. It says you've said you've written it for cash, and the amount is $100. And you've gone to the bank or the credit union to solicit this your own funds as you think, and you're going to walk out with a two $50 bills or five 20 bills with 20 written on the front and the back, and you're going to go and spend it in local economy. Now we do that kind of in fun because the system, if you do it, that's fine, but if somebody else does it, then the system has a problem because it is not liquid. It's highly illiquid. It's fractionally reserved, as the Federal Reserve System will tell you in its very famous book called Popular Money Mechanics. It's still available, describing how this system of elastic medium of exchange works, how meanings stretch, and really, as Dr. Paul Hein will tell you, words that really don't have a meaning at all. Dr. Hein, we live in a fiat money economy, an economy that's constantly stretching, making new money. What is the problem for my listener if the system makes new money? How does it make new money? What is the new money, and what's wrong with it? Isn't that good if we have new money in the economy, Paul Hein?
Well, I guess it depends, David, on what the money is. If people went out and excavated a mine and got gold and silver out of it and used that as money, that would be good because they wouldn't owe it to anybody. But modern money, so-called money, digital money or checkbook money, just numbers, that money is always created as a debt. So no matter how much money is created, more has to be repaid because the interest has to be added in. So ultimately, a fiat system such as ours, where money is created as a debt, is bound to fail, and ours is failing, I think, pretty rapidly.
Well, how is this new money made? How are these new dollars created in the lending process, Dr. Hein?
Well, it used to be with the stroke of a pen, but now I guess it's with a touch of a keystroke. I mean, if you go to the bank to borrow money, they don't lend you money that's on deposit. If they did that, the money supply wouldn't be growing. And yet, when you look at the graphs of the money supply, you see that it's growing at almost a vertical rate. So when you go to the bank to borrow money, they create new money for you simply by adding that amount to your checking account, or by giving you a check for that number and then you deposit it in your account. It's the same thing. So new money is created simply out of nothing.
And is that a problem, Paul Hein? Is there something wrong with that?
Yes, because for every $100 that you borrow that they create out of nothing, you have to pay, say, I'm just making up a number for interest, 105 or 110. So if you borrowed 100, how can you return more than you borrowed? Well, you do by gaining business opportunities and making a profit there. But somehow that's a shortage because all the money that exists was borrowed into existence, except for maybe 5%, which the bank creates for itself. And so what we have is a mounting debt and an inability to repay it except by borrowing more. And I think every child knows that you can't borrow yourself out of debt.
The banking system then and the government with its lender of last resort, the Federal Reserve System, you're saying is making more debt, and which requires yet more to be created to pay off the first or the earlier batches, Dr. Hein.
Yes, you referred to the government just now as the creator of last resort. Actually, I think it's the borrower yeah, the government can be stepped in to borrow, $300 to make a screwdriver or $1,000 for a toilet or some fantastic thing. But that's laughable. And yet, if the government didn't borrow that money and nobody borrowed it, the whole system would fall apart.
In the 2008 meltdown, Dr. Hein, you're the author of All Work and No Pay, one of my favorite books. It's a primer on our money system. In that crisis, the Fed stepped in and absorbed $3 trillion in dodgy bank paper to save the bank's shareholders, and they back to a reasonable operation after all, and this obligation, and somehow put it into the economy as credit. It has monetized this debt in a kind of fascinating and mysterious process. It put that came out. We say brought the after the melt. What is the money that this is not bank, Dr. Hein?
That's an interesting term, lawful money. The people permitting it, I mean, that is to say the government, at least the invisible government or the dark government, the hidden government, these people are the ones who make the lawful money. It's lawful money. Whose names I don't raise the question before they changed it, that said it was payable in lawful money, have asked, well, what is it? Well, the bill itself is the lawful money, which makes it sort of a joke. So as you pointed out earlier, they just eliminated the legal tender. So take it or leave it.
We're talking with Tulis. We do thank you for joining us today on Cash Friday. And Dr. Hein, you're making reference to what my listener has probably multiple copies of on his person, assuming he has several green rectangles in his billfold. And the note says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So what is that? That's legal language. What is that saying? Well, let me just ask you what the contrast is between that statement on the current bill, Dr. Hein, and the one that was on the earlier bills prior to 1963. And it said this before: this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the bank of at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank. Is there a real difference, Dr. Hein, in the legal language on these green rectangle notes?
I would think so, because up until relatively recent times, money was gold and silver coin, and the Constitution mandates that, actually, as if anybody paid any attention to that. And so if you had a bill, and a bill is an IOU that says it was payable in lawful money, that meant you could go to the bank and get gold and silver for it. And at one time you could do that. But when the government decided that it was more advantageous for it simply to print notes for which there was nothing that could be redeemed, they simply dropped that money and said that this note, although in a sense fraudulent because it doesn't actually promise payment of anything, which a note should do, nonetheless, you can offer it in payment or tender it. In other words, it would be legal to tender it. Whereas if it was non-redeemable, that would be a crime. So to absolve themselves of any impending guilt, they just made the note a legal tender, which means the sky's the limit as far as their ability to create them is concerned. And it also means that if you don't accept it, they don't have to offer anything else. So it's like sort of an indirect compulsion to accept their promises as money.
So it's like my listener going to the theater and assuming the hat check, the coat check-in department is open. He goes to the young woman there behind the counter, or the young man behind the counter, and leaves his coat and his wife's coat. And at the end of the program at the Tivoli, he returns to that nice panel there on the side, and rather than be given back his coat and his wife's coat, he's given the same kind of hat check, the same kind of claim check he was received at the beginning. This is your coat. That wouldn't be enough, right? I mean, there has to be a return of the coat when the ticket is given for redemption.
Yes, yeah. It's to hand a piece of paper to somebody and say, "This is your coat," because it has "coat" marked on it. That won't work, obviously. But the problem is, if you you hand somebody a piece of paper with dollar written on it, since they don't know the definition of dollar, and they've always accepted whatever was called a dollar as a dollar, something they could spend and get goods for, the people who are responsible for it could get away with it. It's kind of unfortunate that monetary units have this designation as dollar or mark or franc or something, which doesn't have any specific meaning except for money. You know, if money were designated in ounces or grams, they could hardly change that without causing a disruption of our entire system. But to call it a dollar when nothing else is measured in dollars and the dollar has no particular definition, they can get away with it, and they are.
What you're hearing there are dollars, Dr. Hein. I have my hand, in my right hand, I have $3 coins. They're called Morgans. The dates on them are, one is 1900, one, the other one's 1900, and the third is 1898. And the sound is quite different from the money we have in our, or the coins we have in our pockets today.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, how much, well, no, I won't ask you, that's a personal question, but if you went to the coin store to buy a $1 coin, say a silver coin like the Morgan dollar, you'd pay a number of dollars for it. And that doesn't seem to cause people any bewilderment, whereas it astonished me. How can $1 cost $50? You know, or how can one gold ounce marked $50 cost $1,300?
Well, you're asking a great question. And of course, my listeners should know that if you buy Morgans, which are real dollars, there's a premium on them because they're so attractive. But if you buy the cheapest of silver containing coin, that's 90% silver in dime or quarter form, or even maybe 50-cent form, right now, Dr. Hein, it's about $11,000 in paper for $1,000 in real. But if you're buying a bag of Morgans, you'd probably be paying double. So there's a kind of premium on there's a kind of a premium on buying the larger coin because it's more attractive. So
yes.
Go ahead.
And that's fair enough. I mean, they have a numismatic value, which increases their value even higher. But I don't think there are any silver or gold coins that are sold at the price of silver or gold. There's always a little premium attached to it. But even so, it's amazing that a dollar can cost more than a dollar. It's kind of laughable, really.
I have in my hand a book that I was looking at this morning, having read it previously. Andrew Dixon White's great volume came as a lecture in the late 1800s, Dr. Hein, Fiat Money, Inflation in France. And he says that the question will naturally be asked, on whom did this vast depreciation mainly fall at last? This was during the French Revolution, and the mass inflation in paper money began a great wave of paper across the country at the time of the Revolution. He says, when this currency had sunk to about 1/300th part of its nominal value, and after that to nothing, in whose hands was the bulk of it? So in other words, at the collapse at the end of that system, ending when the plates and the presses to make the money, the currency were burned in public, you might say in public humiliation. He says, the answer is simple. I shall give it in the exact words of a historian. He says, before the end of the year 1795, the paper money was almost exclusively, all right, here's the victim, okay, the victim of paper money, exclusively in the hands of the working classes, employees, and men of small means whose property was not large enough to invest in stores of goods or national lands. Financiers and men of large means were shrewd enough to put as much of their property as possible into objects of permanent value. The working classes had no such foresight or skill or means. On them finally came the great crushing weight of the loss. After the first collapse came up, the cries of the starving. Roads and bridges were neglected. Many manufacturers were given up to utter helplessness. And that's what happened when you have an inflation. We have right now, Dr. Hein, an inflation that's appearing in the financial sector. That's why we have a boom in the stock market. And so the inflation is not tapping my poor listener today. But do you agree with Dr. White's review of the Paris situation at the time of the revolution, that the poor are in the end hurt the most, and they're the ones stuck holding the bag of worthless promises to pay? Dr. Hein.
Well, you know, David, the thing that always puzzles me is that people say that, you know, the rich have such an advantage over the poor and it's not fair and so forth and so on. But they seem to be missing the point. There's always an advantage to being rich, of course. So if you've got wealth, you hopefully have the skills to know that to preserve that wealth, you need to keep it in something tangible. aren't going to do as well as somebody who, when he got the $100, bought a silver or gold coin for it. So yes, the wealthy will survive. The wealthy are the ones behind the system, after all. The people that met at Jekyll Island in, I think, 1910 to set the groundwork for the Federal Reserve System were all wealthy men. So yeah, the wealthy are going to do all right. That's why it's good to be wealthy.
Well, can we really be wealthy if everyone, Dr. Hein, has to use the green rectangle? We're using green rectangles in digital form now, and the trillions and trillions of dollars in debt and obligation created by government and corporations is all in the Federal Reserve dollar. There is some challenge to that in cryptocurrencies, but most of us, we don't use cryptocurrencies. We don't know how to, and so we're really stuck using green rectangles, having money in savings accounts with 0.1% interest rate per year or less, less than 1/10 of 1% interest rate. What can we do practically? What are your suggestions?
Well, you're right. We all have to use those green rectangles, but what we use them for makes a difference. I mean, if you use them for items that are going to depreciate rapidly, that's unfortunate. If you invest them, get rid of them, having money is a very risky thing. If you get rid of the money and get something tangible, something of real, something of wealth, then you're better off, because when the system does fall apart, the ability of people to resort to a barter system will develop very, very rapidly. And if you've got a pocket full of 25-cent pieces, the older ones that make that nice sound when you drop them, the silver ones, you'll be in the catbird seat. I mean, whereas if you invested them all in some stock, which has become worthless, you're going to be one of the ones that are out begging for some help.
This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Paul Hein. Dr. Hein, thank you very much for joining us today on Cash Friday. Appreciate your insights.
My pleasure. You're welcome.
Dr. Hein is the author of one of my favorite books, All Work and No Pay, published by Spencer Judd here in Tennessee back in the 1980s. And I have another caller. Caller, what's on your mind?
Oh, good morning. I'm just calling to get your opinion on investing. And I was wondering, if you're a small-time investor and you have, let's say, $100,000, what would you do with it? Just if you need income or from that money, would you be able to invest it in tangible assets, as you suggest, or should you put it in the stock market?
Well,
I'll just hang up and listen to your answer.
Great. Thank you so much for calling. A question about my regards on investing. I'm afraid I don't give investment advice, and we have yet another call. Caller, what's on your mind?
I have a minute and a half to fix what you guys said that was all wrong. A dollar is not a tangible thing. You can't hold it. It's a weight. When you say a dollar is a tangible thing, or anybody else says that, then the government believes they can make a worthless piece of paper a dollar. The issue here is what can be compelled upon a creditor in lieu of a monetary obligation. And right now the government believes, because they print legal tender on a paper that has no value and no redemption, that you are compelled to accept it because you contracted for dollars. The issue is the law, the legality. Where's the authorization of government to make anything a legal tender? They don't have it. Article 1, Section 10 says no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, not a legal tender. And the federal government was denied that authority. And through their private corporation, who they claim they have no connection to, the Federal Reserve, they cannot then take what they were denied and grant it to them. So we have one big illegal Ponzi scheme. A dollar is not a thing. There's no such thing as a silver dollar. It is a unit of measurement. It's 371.
It's a coin worth a dollar.
Grains of fine silver. It is a weight. It's a weight. And there's no promise to pay on it. And I know you have to go. So you should have the smartest guy probably on the planet, the second smartest guy, which is me. We go, Edwin Vieira is number one. I'm number two on the money issue.
I guess I'm number three.
And I'd be glad to come on your show one day and discuss it.
Thanks, Mike.
And to give you accurate information.
Well, thanks, Mike. Listen, let me just answer the caller's question, the call that ducked between the three that we had. Yes, you can make money in the stock market. I don't give investment advice, but my general advice is divesting national and investing locally. So, and that part of that would be having liquid savings, and that would be in gold and silver. That's liquid money. And again, but it's not working in the economy. Can you work with your money in the economy. That is helping a business grow and becoming an owner in the business with your asset. That might be a way of doing that if you are working lococentrically or nugacentrically. Again, that's not very actionable somehow. You can't pick up a phone and make that happen. But it's the direction that I'm interested in. David Tulis.